I know why all the good-looking guys treat girls like shit. Supply and demand.
They're figuring it out.
In this video, I'm going to cover three main talking points. I'm going to cover the main talking points of Asmongold and Homath in regards to why they believe that women keep on falling for men who basically abuse them in relationships. Then I'm going to cover the evolutionary psychology behind that behavior. And finally, I'll make some recommendations for how we can all avoid related problems. Ultimately, I think the main issue being covered here is why do girls keep on falling for men that don't have their best interest at heart? So the girl in the clip actually summarizes it pretty well. Basically, it's supply and demand. The men that these girls are consistently choosing have too many girls chasing after them to consider any one of them to be of high value. And when I say that these girls are falling for high value men, what I really mean is that they're falling for mistakenly high value men who are actually just men who fall high on the dominant scale. And I use the word dominant because I really think that's the most accurate word to describe the type of men who are comfortable with treating men like trash while also being perceived as high value by women. This is one component of female sexuality that isn't always understood, and it's partially shown in what Asmongold says at minute 154 in his video. He states, "The real good guys aren't the ones using these dating apps and hooking up with a bunch of girls. They're the type that have hobbies like working on their car. They're never going to cheat on you or try to put it in your butt." I'm not going to say that this isn't a good description of a good guy or a good man. What I'm going to explain is that this is not exactly what human evolution trained women to seek. Evolution does not necessarily consider truly good men to be highly favorable to the survival and sustainment of the human species. Evolution has trained women to evaluate their sexual prospects based on their protective, reproductive, and resourceful capacity. In other words, female sexuality has evolved to favor men based on their place in the social hierarchy, and being good, at least in the moral sense of that word, does not necessarily put you at the top of the food chain. Being good is sometimes a component of what increases a man's social hierarchy, but it isn't the only thing that contributes to how sexually valuable he will be perceived. So why do I believe that social hierarchy is the best way to describe the sexual strategy of women? Consider a different but related behavior. So why are women so concerned about looking good when they go out to have a girls' night out? They aren't always going to some place where they're expecting lots of men to be. So why do they need to impress their girlfriends? Why do they need to obsess over beauty standards that don't sexually appeal to the majority of men? So I'm talking about things like the way they decorate their nails, uncomfortable beauty standards like high heels, and having expensive clothes and accessories. None of these things necessarily make them more desirable to men, but what it does do is it indicates to everybody what kind of lifestyle she's capable of providing herself. And historically speaking, those kinds of luxuries were provided to women by having successful and socially dominant or men that were high on the social hierarchy scale. The most dominant members of any historical society have rarely ever been good-natured people. Genghis Khan, for example, was a mass murdering rapist who at one point conquered half of the known world, and he heavily polluted our gene pool with his rapist DNA. Nature does not care about whether or not he was good or bad. All nature cares about is whether or not he was successful, or anybody was successful in producing the most viable offspring. Dominant men who are capable of controlling resources and reproducing using any means, uh, brutal means, rape, you name it, nature does not care so long as you reproduce and produce a child who is then also capable of surviving and reproducing. And unfortunately, because those brutal people have been successful at reproducing in the past, women have been genetically attuned to some extent to seek those kinds of men out. A strong, brutal caveman is unfortunately probably more likely to survive in a harsh world than a weak but kind caveman. We like to think of ourselves as a special and distinct species, but we shouldn't be surprised when we look at our history and our evolutionary past um, that we don't function humanely. We function exactly like the kind of animals that we evolved from on a sexual level. Humans, like many other species, do not use a single breeding strategy. Human females have a complex algorithm used to detect whether a male is more or less likely to be a high value mate. A man's size and muscularity obviously can imply many things, such as how active or lazy they are, testosterone levels, general health, and capacity to defend them and their families from harm. Tough guy attributes, such as tattoos, narcissistic confidence, and assertiveness and aggressive demeanor, can indicate how likely they are to commit to a conflict when critical resources are being competed for. Humor is highly favored as well, which contributes to charisma. It contributes to your ability to draw connections between different things, relate to people, diffuse conflict, and it also helps you convince others of the validity or invalidity of the ideas of various ideas. Basically, it's a complex measurement of several types of intelligence. Women also obviously look at how much wealth a man has when considering whether or not they are going to mate with them. This would be a really long video, obviously, if I talked about everything that a woman considers when looking for a partner. But the point is, females do not simply evolve to assess men desirably based on how good natured they are. So the fact is that many men, while they may be disgusting human beings, sometimes demonstrate several characteristics that indicate to women that they are higher on the social hierarchy. And so, what do we do to resolve this issue? Before I get into that, I also want to say that, we now live in the world of dating where everybody is able to hide their true nature on apps, whereas in our historical societies, we were much more social in our mating behaviors, and we weren't able to keep all of our behaviors basically hidden. So when a man or woman was promiscuous, that became pretty well known pretty fast. If they accumulated a high number of sexual partners, that wasn't going to stay hidden forever. And so these men that women think are high value partners but are actually just bad boys, they're able to hide the fact that they don't actually have a lot to contribute to them other than the fact that they are dominant. Right, so what can we actually do? Unfortunately, we're never going to completely overcome our nature, obviously, but we can at least recognize our weaknesses and make an effort to realize that you are biologically designed to find some evil bastards incredibly attractive. You are going to have to fight your nature to seek the sexual affection of those evil bastards as well. You're going to be faced with situations where you have to choose between a man who is either incredibly attractive to you or but also an asshole and maybe a less impressive but decent human being. It will probably be very difficult for you, and even if you make the right decision, you may still end up looking back and thinking, what if I had chosen the other guys? You are going to have to work to move past the embarrassing feeling of potentially bringing a less impressive man around your friends, but reminding yourself along the way that you made the right choice and you now have a good partner and friend because of that. You will have to learn where the optimal place is to find someone who is actually good. And newsflash, it's probably not on a dating app or at a bar or at a party where people are basically focused on their most immediate needs. You may actually have to commit yourself to something unselfish to find someone who is unselfish. So start volunteering so that you can surround yourself with similarly unselfish men to choose from. Men, you obviously have much less control over this situation, but you can help yourself avoid some heartache by learning to recognize the signs of a woman who is likely attracted to assholes. And you may also need to start thinking about where you are looking for partners and start looking at new locations. Like I said to the girls, start volunteering so you can surround yourself with people who are more likely to have attributes that aren't just focused on superficiality and their most immediate needs, their most immediate desires. If you are looking for partners in places that focused on those most easily gratified human desires, well, you're going to surround yourself with people who are mainly focused on shallow, immediate needs.